Good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us. This morning's learning is sponsored by Rochelle Diamond and family in memory of Chaim Diamond. Chaim ben Arav Avram Mordechai Zichron Livracha should be a schus for his neshama, and we thank the Diamonds for including us. Okay, chapter 49, verse 5. We began discussing this pasuk yesterday as Yaakov is speaking to his sons. He specifically references Shimon and Levi as being brothers. And of course, they're brothers. They're brothers with everyone else as well. So we mentioned Rashi yesterday. Rashi says that the pshat is that they had a way of being on the same page about things. And that's basically what Rashi says. Rashi says there's also a cross-reference. And through this word of brothers, we can understand that they were very instrumental in suggesting that the brothers kill Yosef to begin with. Okay, now let's go to the Ramban. Ramban on Pasuk Hey. Shimon v'Levi achim. Yomar bale achva. He means more than a biological statement. He means they're people living with a sense of brotherhood. Ki yiches libam yochem libam alachosam. They were infuriated by what Shem did to their sister Dinah. So what he's saying is, Yelamed Aleim Schus, by Yaakov saying this about them, that they're brothers, he's defending them in a sense. Ki b'kinasam ala achva asu masha asu. You know why they killed the residents of the city of Shechem? Because they felt their sister's pain. They felt their sister's travail. Lomar she'ein ru'uyim la'onesh gadol. They shouldn't receive a great punishment for what they did because they weren't doing it out of a lust for murder or anything like that. They were doing it out of a sense of responsibility to their sister. Now, happens to be that the sin was a big deal. There's the second part of the verse refers to it as chamas, that they acted in a very strong, inappropriate way. But just appreciate before we talk about the sin, and he's telling them they did the wrong thing, he does recognize that it came from a sentiment of achva, a sentiment of brotherhood, and that's why he refers to them as brothers. Ki Shimon v'Levi achim gemurim, domim u'misachim. Now he says what I really think the pshat is, and this is very similar to what Rashi said. What I really think the pshat is he's saying they were really on the same page. Shimon and Levi were so much connected with each other in their actions. Ukvar pirashti ki Yaakov katzaf al Shimon v'Levi b'hargam anshe ha'ir ba'avur she'asu chamas ki heim lo chatu lahem klal ubo b'vris v'molu. So the Ramban, remember we discussed yesterday that it's a discussion when we shown him if what they did in killing the residents of Shechem was fundamentally unethical. So Ramban says, I already told you that I think it was fundamentally unethical. If you want to kill Shechem and Hamor, go for it. But what does that have to do with all the other men of the city? What did they do to you? They hadn't done anything to Dinah, the other men of the city. And they even were willing to have a circumcision. V'ula yashuvu el Hashem. Who knows? Maybe this would have been the first step towards a mass monotheistic movement in the city of Shechem. Maybe they all would have become children of Avraham. Says the Ramban. We know there was a concept of people who weren't born into the family who of their own volition would have joined the belief system of the Jewish people. That's the whole thing with Avram and Sarah and the souls that they made in Haran. And you killed these people. What did they do to you? They even got a bris and everything. So, again, the Ramban is still recognizing that they meant well, but they did wrong. The Shimon and Levi. V'yod charalo shlo yomru ki bat saso nase adavar v'yichel Hashem sheyaseh hanavi chamas v'shod. A separate issue is that he was worried. Not only was he concerned that they're acting too quickly against these people who might be involved in coming under God's tent, but think about people who are considering coming under God's tent. Yaakov is the representative, the standard bearer for monotheism right now. So does he condone this activity, that annihilating the men of a city, really? So it's a chil Hashem for other people. V'zes tam b'sodam al tavo nafshi. And this, says the Ramban, is the meaning of the next pasuk. In their secrets, my soul will not come. Meaning, hisnatzlos shlohaya b'sodam ba'anosam b'mirma u'b'kaholim l'misyachik k'shabo al yir v'harkum. So even at this juncture, Yaakov is actively distancing himself from the approach of Shimon and Levi. He's just saying, listen, I didn't have anything to do with it. I don't know where they're coming from. It wasn't my idea. Okay, so that's the Ramban. Definitely an interesting shot to think about. And now let's go on to the Sforno. Sforno on Pasuk. Achim, Shimon and Levi are brothers. Vayakavod haroi l'Ruvain ra'ui lahem v'naflo mimenu. The Sforno goes in a completely different direction. We're told that Yaakov is conveying to Ruvain, in his words, than which we didn't do, that because of his rash act in moving around Yaakov's beds, he has lost the birthright. He's the firstborn. He's lost the birthright. So who are the next children in the line? Shimon and Levi. So the Sforno says, theoretically, Shimon and Levi are the brothers, not the brothers to each other. Of course they're the brothers to each other. Of course they're the brothers to everyone. But he means Shimon and Levi, they're the next ones in line. And theoretically, maybe they would merit the birthright. Amnam klei chamas b'cheroseihem. But because they acted in this very aggressive manner in the killing of the residents of Shechem, v'zeh lo yos l'melech asher b'mishpat yamid aretz. So therefore, they're not going to have the leadership role of the family either. Lachein lo yos malchus l'shomechad mishneim. It's interesting. According to the Sforno, we're not talking about a birthright in terms of double portion. That we discussed earlier in the week about Yosef gets the double portion in terms of the two tribes coming from him. He's talking right now about being the leader. So Ruvain's not appropriate to be the leader. Shimon and Levi are not appropriate to be the leader. Who's next up? Yehuda. And indeed, Yaakov says to Yehuda, Toyodu chachecha, that your brothers will recognize you, and the staff of leadership will not leave Yehuda. And of course, David HaMelech and the Davidic line are part of the tribe of Yehuda. So according to the Sforno, we're talking about who should be the leader of the family and the nation ultimately. And he's saying that Shimon and Levi, not them either. So that's very different ideas on why it says Shimon v'Levi Achim. Okay, I found our discussion yesterday in the end of the question and answer segment so interesting. We're going to change topic today. I wasn't going to do this, but let's do it. Verse 8. So now it's Yehuda's turn. Yehuda ato yoducha achecha. We mentioned yesterday that the usage of the word ata, you, is striking. We discussed Rashi yesterday. We're not going to do that again today. But Yehuda, your brothers will recognize you. Your brothers will thank you. It's clearly something positive, but the phrasing is a little bit interesting. Your brothers will admit to you. What does it mean? Kli yakar on pasuk ches. Yehuda toyoducha checha. Lefisha ato Yehuda hodesa b'maasei Tamar. Koroas shem Yehuda. Just very briefly, the story of Tamar. We discussed it briefly at the time. Yehuda suspected Tamar of having relations outside of the family, and he thought that was such a serious sin that he was going to punish her with death. And it actually was him who she had relations with. She had disguised herself. He didn't realize it was her. Long story. She sent him a very subtle hint that it was him who had relations with her, and she didn't say so publicly. And he could have let the pitch fly by and ignored it. And he publicly admitted that he was the one who had relations with her. So, says the Kli Yakar, since you were a person who was modeh, who admitted when you did something, and by the way, that's the essence of your name. You know, there's an idea that the name that a person has says a lot about who they are. That doesn't necessarily mean the parents at the time understand it, of course. But Yehuda is related to the word modeh. So we normally think of it as giving thanks, which of course is related to that word as well. But literally, part of being modeh is to just admit. That's what thanks is. I admit that I needed you about something. But we're saying it means admitting that he did something wrong. So this was his essence, and he did it. Cain, mida keneged mida. God will reward you measure for measure. Yoducha checha. You admitted when you did something wrong. Your brothers will admit to you that you are the one most fit to be the leader. Yoducha la malchus. They will concede that you should be the leader, you should be the king. V'lo yevoshu. And they won't be embarrassed by that. It won't bother them that they're ceding the rulership to you. Kishem shato yisa moda v'lo bosh v'lahodos ala emes. Just like you admitted that you were the one who had relations with Tamar and you weren't embarrassed to admit the truth, kach achecha lo yevoshu. So too your brothers won't be embarrassed. Ki yodu al ha'emes. They'll admit the truth. Shelecha lavad yasa hamalucha. That to you alone is fit kingship. So that's an interesting shot in the words that the brothers will admit to you, very literal. Now let's go to the Orach Chaim. Orach Chaim and Pasuk Ches. Yudah ta tzarich ladas. One needs to understand. Lama hutzrach lomer lo atav. We mentioned this question yesterday. Why does he have to say you? Kimin she'imo he'medabir uma ba'alamayit. He's talking to you. He's addressing himself to Yehuda. Of course, he doesn't have to say you. It's understood in the context. Od lama lo amar v'yadcha v'yishtachvu kimin she'im dvarim nosafim. It's just a different point, just a technical point. These are separate statements. These presumably have nothing to do with the admission that the brothers will make to you. So it should say v'yadcha. And I want to tell you something else. Says the Orach Chaim. It means you, they'll recognize you, Perish, in asrara mascheles la'asid, k'derech shar brachos, v'amurim l'shar ha'achim, she'im l'zmanim rechokim, l'ksheyichnesu l'aretz, ela'ata, ba'atzmecha, yoducha achecha. A very interesting pshat. It gets confusing a little bit in this parsha when we're talking about the messages Yaakov is conveying to his sons, because the vast majority of the messages he's conveying to his sons have to do with things that are not going to happen during their lifetimes. Right? This is like things about the tribes, not about the individuals. So, and certainly most of the positive things that will happen, almost all of them are things way down the road. So Orach Chaim says the pshat in the pasuk is, Ata yoducha achecha. I'm not talking about your descendants. I'm talking about you. You will be recognized by your brothers as the leader. So just an interesting pshat. Okay. And then he says the comments about Yad Chabar, Vevech, and the like are talking about a later time for the tribe. He talks about Shaul HaMelech. Okay, so we discussed this morning the Ramban and the Sforno, in addition to Rashi yesterday, as to why Shimon and Levi are referred to as brothers. We discussed the Kli Yakar regarding the significance of the brothers admitting to Yehuda, and we discussed the Orach Chaim in addition to Rashi from yesterday regarding why it says you in the context of Yehuda.